Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. We just landed from El Salvador. Pretty short flight, no Wi-Fi, one of those weird moments when you're totally out of touch. By the time we landed, things seemed to have changed dramatically in Washington. It was at least the fourth day in a row that has happened, where all of a sudden everything you thought you knew about politics in D.C. changed in just an instant. This time, of course, it was the news that the White House Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus, was out to be replaced by General Kelly of the Department of Homeland Security. The president first announced this change in a tweet, saying this, quote, "I am pleased to inform you that I have just named General Secretary John F. Kelly as White House Chief of Staff. He is a great American and a great leader. John has also done a spectacular job at Homeland Security. He's been a true star of my administration." The president then made this statement.
Reince is a good man. John Kelly will do a fantastic job. General Kelly has been a star, done an incredible job thus far, respected by everybody. A great, great American. Reince Priebus, a good man. Thank you very much.
Will Kelly make an effective chief of staff? Everyone's hoping for it, but that may be less important right now than the perception that he'll bring stability and order to the place. The White House needs that more than anything at the moment. The most powerful branch of the world's most powerful government seemed to devolve this week to a state of nature, a war of all against all. It was chaos for a minute, and chaos is always the worst thing. People need order and continuity. They need to believe that the world they'll wake up to tomorrow will bear some resemblance to the one they're living in right now. When they begin to doubt that, they become anxious and crazy, and things begin to fall apart. You've seen it all over the world, and that's the last thing we need here. Our political system is fragile enough. Bad things could happen. If you can't feel that, you haven't been living here. So let's hope the upswing begins with General Kelly this afternoon. For more on what's going on, Fox chief political anchor and special report host Bret Baier joins us. Bret, how did this happen, to the extent we know?
Well, I think it happened over a number of days, Tucker. To hear Reince Priebus tell the story, he resigned yesterday, Thursday. The tweet obviously took everybody by surprise, but apparently the president had been talking to General Kelly over a number of weeks to look into being the chief of staff. I think they're looking for order, for continuity, as you said, and General Kelly has a history of doing that. We had a former Defense Secretary, Leon Panetta, former chief of staff himself to Bill Clinton, on the show earlier, and Kelly was Panetta's aide at the Pentagon, senior aide, and he believes in his mind as a Democrat that he's comforted by this choice and called it the best choice that Donald Trump has made as president.
Yeah, I mean, someone who can get all the fire going in the same direction, like outside the building. One of the key questions, it seems to me, is to what extent does he have command of the White House staff? Will the communications director, for example, report to him or still directly to the president? Do we know?
Now, that is the question, Tucker, and we don't know. We're hearing he has a lot of authority, but will Anthony Scaramucci report to the chief of staff, or will he still have a direct line to President Trump? The other question is, how does Jared Kushner, the son-in-law, senior advisor, factor in? Will he also go to General Kelly? What about Ivanka Trump, also a senior advisor and daughter? So I think there are still questions about the order, but we're hearing senior officials say that he has the authority, the trust of the president, and he's going to straighten out this White House.
You'd hate to speculate, but you'd also have trouble believing that the general, who I think is regarded as successful and competent, impressive, would have taken the job without assurances that he'd have the authority to do it, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, especially if they've been having the conversation over a number of weeks. He was in a job that he was succeeding at. I mean, the stats were going his way, Department of Homeland Security, and I think, he fell on his sword at the beginning when that executive order kind of backfired. He was the one who went out in front of the press and said, I can do better, and did. So I do think that there was this loyalty factor, and we'll see if the authority falls in. Just one historical context here. 1973, President Nixon turned to Al Haig to become chief of staff when H.R. Haldeman was exited out after Watergate. Al Haig, a former general, 2-star, then promoted to a 4-star, took over to try to run that White House.
Yeah, to bring order out of chaos. So the only criticism I've seen so far has been from Barbara Lee of California, who's usually an outlier, the only person who voted against the invasion of Afghanistan, for example. And she said this is a terrifying indicator of the militaristic direction the White House is moving. But has there been other criticism from Democrats? Has anybody gone after this choice that you've seen?
Not really. I mean, I think it's been pretty quiet. Think about just the messaging, what we've been through. Monday, it's hard to believe, but it was Monday Sean Spicer left. In between there, we've had the new incoming White House communications director that caused his own stir. Then we've had this health care bill that falls apart. We also had a number of events during the week, including in North Korea launching a missile today, an ICBM, Iran, and now you have at the end of the week, and it's only Friday, the White House Chief of Staff stepping down. So it's been quite a journey this week.
I would add that the president also attacked his own attorney general repeatedly during the week.
And the attorney general fired back in El Salvador with you.
So I was talking to someone at the White House just a minute ago, we just landed, who said there was concern there among the people who had come over from the RNC, the Republican National Committee. Reince Priebus, of course, was their guy. He was the chairman of the RNC. And they believe that maybe this suggests a move away from kind of the conventional Washington Republican way of doing things to something else. Do you think they're reading too much into it?
No, I don't. I mean, I think that this health care situation with this vote going down was tremendously disappointing. If you're to believe the story put out that Reince Priebus resigned yesterday, that was before the health care bill fell apart. But possibly there's some timeline issues here, and I think that you have a Republican establishment figure that was in the White House, and if you think about it, this president probably said, let's try it from the outside. And now he's got a lot of outsiders. And the question is, will General John Kelly be up on the domestic political inside, or will Kellyanne Conway or Steve Bannon or Jared Kushner take a more prominent role on that politics track?
Well, that's exactly it. And my last question, I don't know if this is even knowable, but what are his politics? General Kelly, do we know what he believes, where he would naturally align in the debate going on in the White House?
You know, he's been very loyal to this president. He's worked with both sides of the aisle, as I mentioned, as a senior aide to Leon Panetta and also to Bob Gates. He was a Marine general. He was the commander of Southern Command, 3 tours in Iraq, lost his son in Afghanistan fighting for the country. His ideology and his politics on domestic issues has really never come up. But he is someone who's very accomplished and somebody who likes order, and that possibly is what this White House wants.
Yeah, and that may be the most important thing right now. Brett Baer, thanks a lot for that. Answering all those
Tucker.
questions. I appreciate it. Well, Reince Priebus himself spoke with Sean Hannity tonight. Here's part of what he said.
I'm feeling good about the fact that he's making a change that makes him comfortable with moving forward. You know, we had a good talk yesterday. I resigned. He accepted it. And then we started working together and talking quite a few times about who would be a great pick to come in here and be the chief of staff. And I can't think of anyone better than a 4-star General John Kelly.
That'll interview tonight at 10 on Sean's show. For more on the departure of Reince Priebus and the elevation of John Kelly to White House Chief of Staff, we're joined by writer, columnist, and let's be honest, savant, Charles Krauthammer. Charles, what does this mean? What's the obvious takeaway from what we're watching today?
Well, the obvious takeaway was that this was a White House in chaos, and it simply couldn't continue. You know, that old saying from the former chairman of the Economic Commission for Richard Nixon was, when something cannot go on, it won't.
Stein's Law, yes.
Stein's Law, it won't go on, and it had to. You know, Priebus is a good man, the president is right, but he was over his head. He was not a confidant of the president. He didn't have the authority that you needed. People went around him. Now, what the White House needed, and I think, Pete, the reason that you haven't had even Democratic criticism of the appointment is that we're getting what we needed, which is somebody who will be the gatekeeper, somebody who will restore some kind of order, somebody who will be the authority. And I do think, we talked about this earlier in the night, the test case is going to be, everybody's going to have to go through the chief of staff, we hope. The test case is Scaramucci. If Scaramucci has a direct line, then we are going to have parallel governments. If Scaramucci has to go through Kelly, then we are going to have something that resembles a reasonable chain of command.
Is it even possible that General Kelly would have left a good job and a great reputation accrued over 40 years in public service to take a job where he didn't have authority over the communications director?
I think you're right. I think that would have been a condition. The interesting question is, and I think Scaramucci will have to go through Kelly. The interesting question is, what about the president's daughter and son-in-law? That's a whole different category. You know, we elected a president, but we also elected, knowingly or not, a royal family. And that's a different order of magnitude than just the director of communications. So I suspect they will have their own access. But I think for discipline in the staff, Scaramucci is going to be the test case.
Yeah, a Marine general, if he can't pull that off, it can't be done. There are ideological fault lines in the administration that don't often come to the surface, but they're real and they're obvious to people who work there, between the kind of soft nationalists represented by Steve Bannon and the New York finance people, who are many there. Does Kelly obviously align with either one of those sides?
I don't think so. I think he's the arbiter. He's the guy who's neutral. He's the guy who imposes order. He's the, he's the gatekeeper. He's the bouncer. And that's his job.
You think he'll be able to do it?
I think he will. But in the end, it depends not on him, but on Trump. You know, the success of a chief of staff is 90% whether he has the authority and the confidence of the president, and whether the president will listen to him. I'm rather pessimistic about that, but if anybody can do it, it'll be Kelly.
So I have to ask you a healthcare question. Is it over for the moment, the push to replace Obamacare with something else?
I think so, and it should be. They ran into a dead end. I'm rather critical of McCain's vote. I don't see why he didn't want to proceed to conference to see whether Republicans could have hammered something out. But this is really a dead end. They're going to have to regroup and do this with Democrats. And I think the key here is going to be semantic. The Democrats want their pound of flesh for the failure, and they're going to extirpate the word repeal. Republicans are going to have to abolish the word repeal. If they talk about repair, and in the end, it won't make much difference on the ground in the substance of things. That's where we're headed. We're going to repair Obamacare. And as we see, over 7 years, the country got used to it and didn't want to give it up.
The Improve Obamacare Act next year. Charles, thanks a lot for that, for putting it in perspective.
My pleasure, yeah.
Drama in the White House has distracted everyone from some big stories that have been going on. Two developments that could turn into major scandals for the Democratic Party. We'll discuss them next and give you some details on what's been going on. Also, the White House promising to crack down on MS-13 and other criminal gangs. Up ahead, we'll talk to someone who says the attack on MS-13 is actually an attack on all immigrants somehow. Stay tuned. On the House Judiciary Committee sent a letter to Attorney General Jeff Sessions requesting the appointment of a second special counsel, this one to investigate possible wrongdoing by Hillary Clinton, former FBI Director Jim Comey, and Obama AG Loretta Lynch. John Daniel Davidson is a senior correspondent for The Federalist and has been following this while the rest of us have been mesmerized by staff problems over at the White House. John, thanks a lot for coming on. Tell us, what's the substance of this?
Well, essentially, this stems from former FBI Director James Comey's testimony earlier this year that he was told by Obama's Attorney General Loretta Lynch not to refer to the Clinton email investigation as an investigation, but as a matter.
Right.
And that, of course, you know, he complied with that request, sort of in a misleading way for the American public. But it also stems from Loretta Lynch's meeting with Bill Clinton on the tarmac last summer in Arizona. You know, there's a lot of unanswered questions about that. That, of course, was what prompted James Comey to come out last July and make this declaration that, you know, Hillary Clinton's email server was reckless, it was a bad idea, but it wasn't a crime, and therefore, you know, no reasonable prosecutor would ever bring charges against this. He did that because he thought the Department of Justice had lost credibility with the American people because of that meeting with Bill Clinton. And he was right.
What was interesting about that story was Loretta Lynch said she was going to recuse herself from matters pertaining to Hillary Clinton, and there the story kind of ended, and that's where the public knowledge of the details of that stopped. And I didn't remember any news organizations really pushing to find out what that meeting was about in the first place. Do you think we will find out? Do you think there will be a special counsel appointed to determine what happened?
Well, I think that we're not going to find out ever unless there is some sort of a special counsel and some kind of an investigation into what happened. Clearly, something shady went on the tarmac. Clearly, this was a strange decision for James Comey to make. Remember, James Comey is not somebody previously in his career who was shy about getting into dodgy obstruction of justice cases. So for him to come out and say, well, Hillary Clinton didn't do anything wrong, no obstruction of justice here, is just kind of an odd thing for him particularly to say. So I don't think that we'll ever get to the bottom of this without some kind of an investigation to clear up all these questions that nobody dug into last year.
Yeah. I mean, remember, this is the guy who sent Martha Stewart to federal prison because she was obviously a danger to the republic, but somehow Hillary Clinton, no problem, don't ask questions. Okay, so the House Judiciary Committee isn't the only group going after the Obama administration. Yesterday, House Intel Committee Chairman Devin Nunes said the Obama administration ordered the unmasking of hundreds of American names that appeared in intelligence reports during and after the 2016 election, a pretty short period. Nunes says the unmasking could have been intended for partisan political purposes. What do we know about this, John? This seems like a big deal. Is it a big deal?
It is, in part because Nunes is saying that a lot of the officials who were asking for these unmaskings, and by the way, unmasking just means that you asked for a U.S. citizen to be identified in an intelligence report. Usually their identities are withheld for privacy reasons. But apparently a lot of these requests had no apparent intelligence value to them at all, and the people requesting them didn't say why they wanted these unmaskings done. Now, we know for sure that former CIA Director Brennan and former Secretary of State and UN Ambassador Susan Rice both requested unmaskings in their roles. But we don't know about these other officials who asked for the unmaskings or why, including the former UN Ambassador Samantha Power, who hasn't come forward with any explanation as to why she should need U.S. citizens to be unmasked. And so there's a real concern about why were so many people asked to be unmasked, and who were the officials that were asking for it?
And these are political figures. I mean, Susan Rice and Samantha Power, foreign policy experts, but they're also, partisan political people. And by the way, our intelligence agencies are not supposed to be spying on American citizens. That's the whole point of redacting the names. So when you uncover the names, it's a big step. Do we know how common that is? Like in a normal administration, are hundreds of Americans' names being unmasked by political appointees in the West Wing? Is that normal?
No, it's not normal, and that's why this is news and is something that more people should be talking about, but it's not as Games of Thrones-ish as the palace intrigue at the White House. But no, it's not normal, and it's especially not normal for there to be hundreds of such requests in a relatively short period of time that happens to coincide with a presidential election, and then, of course, all of the requests that came in after the election, but before Trump was sworn in.
Exactly. I mean, look, Anthony Scaramucci may say buffoonish things. He does. He has no real power. You know who has real power? CIA, NSA. They have real power. They can read your email, listen to your calls. They can do whatever they want, and we have to be assured they're not misusing those powers. I think it's a huge deal, but maybe you and I are alone in that. Thanks a lot for joining us tonight.
Thanks.
Even as he's shaking up the White House, President Trump is promising a national crusade against MS-13 and other international criminal gangs. We just visited El Salvador. After the break, we'll discuss the MS-13 threat with an immigrants' rights activist who says this whole thing is just an attack on people from other countries. Stay tuned.
It's just a burst pipe.
The problems with MS-13 in our week-long series, Hunting MS-13. But the gang isn't just a problem in Central America. Unfortunately, hence our series, the Department of Justice estimates there are more than 10,000 MS-13 members in the U.S. across at least 40 states. Now, the Trump administration has made the eradication of the group a priority. even as he was reshuffling the West Wing. President Trump was in Long Island today, where he spoke to law enforcement about the threat from MS-13 and other gangs. Watch.
Together, we're going to restore safety to our streets and peace to our communities. And we're going to destroy the vile criminal cartel MS-13 and many other gangs. But MS-13 is particularly violent. They don't like shooting people because it's too quick. It's too fast. I was reading one of these animals was caught and explaining they like to knife them and cut them and let them die slowly because that way it's more painful and they enjoy watching that much more. These are animals. I have a simple message today for every gang member and criminal alien that are threatening so violently our people. We will find you, we will arrest you, we will jail you, and we will deport you.
Daniel Altshuler is Director of Civic Engagement and Research at Make the Road New York, a self-described immigrant rights group, and he joins us now. Daniel, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Tucker.
So, I don't know if I'm mischaracterizing your position, but you seem to believe that there's something wrong with the president cracking down on MS-13, and I'm baffled by that.
Well, you know, what happened today was that 500 Long Islanders, immigrants and community allies alike, were standing up and saying they're united against the hate of this administration, and in particular, rejecting the use of a local tragedy to score political points in his broader anti-immigrant agenda. This is what we're seeing today and this week is the same thing that we've been seeing since day one of this administration, in which he called immigrants criminals and rapists and tried to paint with a broad brush all immigrants as criminals. And this vilification of immigrant communities is absolutely unacceptable.
Okay. But I think today, unless I missed something, the president was coming out against MS-13, which is a criminal gang, which has, as you know, turned El Salvador upside down. Talk to any Salvadoran, here or there. Everybody believes MS-13 is a massive problem, and the president is announcing a crackdown on that gang. Why is that bad?
So there are two things. First of all, we have to understand this in the context of vilifying and criminalizing all immigrants, which has been the agenda of this president since the first day of his campaign. This is about tearing apart immigrant families.
Okay,
if you want to
spare me the wait, stop. I'm giving you a voice on this show.
Sure.
Spare me the dumb rhetoric and answer my question. What is wrong with going after, and just don't stop with the slogans. Honestly, what's wrong with going after MS-13?
These aren't slogans. These are hard data, Tucker. If you want to look at the #1 group in which we've seen increases in ICE arrests since Donald Trump has become the president, it is people with absolutely no record of interactions with the criminal justice system. What is happening right now is that the president would like to paint immigrants as criminals. The problem is that the data what the data suggests, Tucker, is that immigrants are much less likely to commit crimes than native-born Americans. What the president is trying to do.
Stop. I know you want to give your speech, but I'm asking you about MS-13. You don't like the administration's position on illegal immigration. I get it.
Tucker, what I'm saying is that this is a convenient example.
But there's also a reality. Oh, stop. Wait, stop. There's a reality at the bottom of this. Hold on. There's a reality, and I would think that you, as someone who claims to care about immigrants, would at least acknowledge the reality, which is that MS-13 preys upon immigrants. They're not going after me or you. They're almost entirely going after Salvadoran immigrants, a lot of them illegal, and extorting money from them, and in some cases killing them. It's happening in El Salvador, where we just came from today, and it's happening here. That's totally real. And so why is your position that it's bad to crack down on people who are tormenting immigrants? I'm totally confused.
I'm sorry that you're confused, Tucker. I'm happy to repeat myself if it's helpful. But I will tell you, no one is denying.
You didn't answer my question.
I'll answer you. No one is saying that there's not a public safety issue. There is a public safety issue, and I've worked in Brentwood, where the president went today, for years, and talk and work with immigrant families on a daily and weekly basis. But what we're saying is that if you really want to understand this public safety issue, just as if you want to understand it with other gangs, you have to understand decades of systematic neglect of these communities. You have to understand it in the context.
Where'd you go to college? Where'd you go to college?
I went to Amherst College.
Of course you did.
Where did you go,
because
Tucker?
you're approaching this,
Where did you
nowhere
go,
impressive.
Tucker?
I can promise
I'm
you.
curious.
I went to Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut.
We played each other
only
in
someone
sports. We
who
went to very similar colleges.
Honestly, only someone who went to an overpriced college could reach a conclusion so theoretical that it's utterly divorced from reality. Look, you don't like Trump. I get it. That's fine. A lot of people don't. But immigrants in America are actually being terrorized by this group. So in this one moment, your interests intersect with those of the president. He wants to stop a group that's hurting people you claim to represent, but you won't acknowledge that.
Our interests
Why?
absolutely are not aligned. What he wants to do is tear apart immigrant families. What we have seen is that he is absolutely focused on tearing mothers from their children. If you want, we can talk about very specific
Who's a bigger threat to immigrant
examples.
families? Oh, hold on. Here's a really simple question. Who's a bigger threat to immigrant families, the president or MS-13?
The president. Without question. This is someone who is attacking, who is vilifying 12 million people in this country, trying to paint them with the brush of being criminals despite all the data demonstrating otherwise, and vowing to separate their families, to separate children from their parents.
There are a lot of data on this question, and we know for a fact that MS-13 members, it seems like the majority of them here illegally, again, are hurting immigrants. Now, you're making the case basically that if a drunk driver kills somebody, we shouldn't attack him because we'd be vilifying all drivers. That's insane. Why can't we just call bad actors what they are? You believe that the president, who has actually not killed anybody with a screwdriver, who is not extorting money from small business owners, you're saying that he's a bigger threat than MS-13? You really have to go to Amherst to reach a conclusion.
Tucker, if you want to understand the threat to immigrant communities, you have to understand the broader context here. There's no question that there's a public safety issue that affects immigrant communities. But you also need to understand that the agency that he's seeking to empower is a rogue and out-of-control agency in which, in the last year, 10 immigrants have died in detention because of neglect and abuse from Immigration and Customs Enforcement. This is precisely the rogue agency that the president is seeking to empower. And what we are saying is we refuse and refute the vilification and criminalization of immigrant communities, and we're going to stand together. And what happened today, if you want to understand,
I bet they look at you in total confusion, like, who's this college kid telling us that we should put up with MS-13 because it's systemic racism or something? They're like, look, these people are taking money from us. They just killed 2 girls with screwdrivers. Like, maybe they should go to jail. But no, the guy from Amherst is like, really, you don't understand the power structure is oppressing you. They're like, they don't like MS-13.
Tucker, we speak every day with folks in this community. We were out there. There were 500 of us in Brentwood. Have you been? I suspect you have not been to Brentwood, but what I tell you
I've never been to
if you go there, and I'd encourage you to go talk to people, if you do, what you will hear from community members is they are working together to address these issues. If they don't,
what are they doing? What are they doing? What are they doing? No. First of all, I just came from El Salvador like an hour ago, a city that, a country that's been paralyzed by MS-13. It's got the highest murder rate in the world. It is true. And so I guess, let me just ask you for some specifics, since you're Mr. Data Guy. What specifically are these 500 community members doing to fight against MS-13 that's more effective than what the president just
Well, I'll share with you, for instance, our organization, Make the Road New York, is working with young people for summer programs to ensure that they have access to opportunities, summer jobs, and ultimately partnering with other gang prevention organizations who are working on Long Island every day to show young people a brighter future, and also to advocate for greater investment in our communities. And what I will tell you on the nature of investment,
whatever that means, but why can't we? And I applaud you. No. Here, I'm applauding you. I'm saying, look, if you offer young people something to do during the summer, that's a virtuous act. But you can also acknowledge that there are bad people, criminals out there who are preying upon the weak, including your constituents, and you want to put them in jail and send them out of the country? Like, there's no reason we should have to deal with murderers who aren't even legal citizens. Like, get the hell out of this country. Is that a bigoted thing to say? No.
I appreciate you applauding the work that we're doing. Part of the work that we're doing also with our community members, and the thing that we're hearing more, I just actually spoke with an immigrant parent in Brentwood today who said, we need more resources for our kids so they actually see and seize opportunities. One of the other things that's happening in Washington right now, as the president is using this as a convenient example to justify an anti-immigrant agenda, is that they're debating the federal federal budget. And what President Trump wants to do is invest.
MS-13,
What he wants to do
you know anything
is
about
invest
the federal budget. I mean, that's silly.
What the president wants to do is invest billions of dollars. What he wants to do is invest billions of dollars in investing in thousands upon thousands of ICE agents and building a wall that people on both sides of the political aisle say is a senseless idea, while cutting massively public education funding,
but by the way,
affordable housing funding, environmental protection funding.
I just concluded that you don't actually know anything, and you're specializing in the kind of grotesque overstatement that political consultants engage in. This is not a serious conversation. And let me just end on this. I bet your constituents back in Brentwood, when you're not around, describe you as loco. I really do. I doubt they take you seriously. You're like making excuses for MS-13, which is tormenting them. I doubt they appreciate that. I haven't met them. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, you're wrong, actually. You know, we're a member-based organization. We work very closely with community members. If you want to discuss data with me anytime, I'm very happy to do it. I actually have a PhD in political science, so we can talk more about it. It's actually about Central American politics.
Where did you, very quick, where did you get that PhD? Just so I can make sure none of my kids go there. Oh, Oxford. Okay, good. That's
you don't want your kids to go to Oxford?
Thank you.
You don't want...
No, not anymore. I did. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. We'll have more on the war against America's deadliest gang next week with our special series Hunting MS-13. Tune in, if you would. President Trump justified the exclusion of transgender soldiers from the services by citing the high medical costs. Lots of people in the media said that was absurd. But actually, there's some new numbers out today that suggest it was not so absurd. We'll talk to a reporter who's actually covering this. Stay tuned. Hi. In response, of course, the press jumped on him and said that's not true at all. The Washington Post, for example, cited a Rand Corporation paper that found it would not be expensive at all. Transgender soldiers would cost the military just a few $1 million a year. So what is the truth about this? Elizabeth Harrington is a writer for the Washington Free Beacon. She's looked into it in some detail, and she joins us tonight. Elizabeth, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So what's the truth here? What would this cost?
This would cost, it's striking because the numbers, in fact, are there's only 0.7% of the active duty military population are transgender. But the cost is actually $1.3 billion over 10 years. And these numbers come from the Congresswoman Vicky Hartzler from Missouri. And I think they provide a much far accurate picture than the Rand Corporation study, which was commissioned by the Obama administration. Had very low numbers estimating the actual amount of transgenders in active duty. They excluded the reserves, they excluded the Guard, and they only assumed that 5% would get transgender surgeries. But the fact is, a more accurate number is 30%, and it's really a conservative estimate that 30% would get the surgeries, because actually, in fact, a much higher percentage of transgender individuals express the desire to get a surgical transition in the future someday. And if they're taxpayer funded, look, sex changes aren't cheap. And if they're taxpayer funded and they're free, I think it'll incentivize a lot of more transgender individuals to utilize taxpayer funding for these high cost surgeries.
Is there any suggestion that those surgeries, whatever their cost, will improve military readiness, will make the military more effective at fighting wars?
No, and that's one thing I wasn't able to mention in the report, but it's striking because even the Rand Corporation admits that every transgender soldier who goes through transition will be out in estimated 238 days. So that is 238 days that they're not going to be deployed overseas in active duty, and someone else will have to go in their place. So when the White House says this is about cost, but it's also about readiness, they're absolutely right, because they're taking the place of someone else, and they get to have the taxpayer-funded surgery, and then they're not available to be deployed because these surgeries are extensive, and it's 238 days. That's most of a full year. So it's really striking.
Well, I'm confused. I mean, again, I'm not attacking anyone. I'm not physically qualified to serve in the U.S. military. So, you know, I'm not singling anyone out. But you keep hearing people say that the president's ban on this, or his tweet announcing a ban on this, will make our country less safe. How exactly would that work? Why would it be less safe?
Right. Really, the military is no place for political correctness, and the military discriminates on who serves every day. If you're obese, if you're flat-footed, if, you know, a variety of medical reasons, you can be denied from entering the service. And the fact of the matter is there's a tremendous amount of cost involved with transgender individuals. This estimate of the $1.35 billion over 10 years does not even include hormone therapy, which the estimates are $1,200 a month for hormone replacement therapy. So there's a tremendous amount of cost, but it's also the readiness issue. And I don't think there are many qualified people that can serve, and really disqualifying transgender because of these very practical reasons shouldn't get in the way of us being a strong military force.
Well, it doesn't make you a bigot to bring it up. I guess that would be my argument. Elizabeth,
Right.
Thank you very much for adding some facts to a debate that's riddled with dishonesty and demagoguery. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
North Korea just launched another missile which could conceivably be used to launch nuclear bombs at America or our allies. Why isn't that threat, which is a real one, getting attention, especially relative to Vladimir Putin, who hacked our democracy? Scott Adams has thought a lot about this, and he'll be with us in a minute to explain. While Washington is consumed with the power struggles in the West Wing, and honestly, we are too, it's irresistible, but actual events, real events, keep occurring around the world. Today, the tin pot dictatorship of North Korea launched its second ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile. The rocket, which could theoretically carry a nuclear weapon far enough to hit a target here in the U.S., traveled about 600 miles before splashing down off the coast of Japan. North Korea seems to be America's most belligerent and dangerous enemy. So why is everyone in Washington obsessed with Vladimir Putin and Russia instead? Scott Adams, who created Dilbert, has thought a lot about this, and he joins us tonight. Scott, thanks for coming on. Why are we so focused on this? Is, again, I'm not carrying water for Vladimir Putin, but North Korea, Russia, it's not even a close contest between which poses a greater threat. Why is our focus on Russia rather than North Korea?
Well, North Korea has the tragic problem of being a boring story, even though it's the most deadly one. Because if you think about it, what people care about are other people. They care about characters. The Russia story has all kinds of characters, like they're just made-for-TV characters. North Korea has one character, and he's literally hiding. All right, he's no good to us. And, you know, the stories about hardware and this missile is better, it sounds like we've already heard the story, because it's the same story. We just keep hearing it again. It's like Groundhog Day. Well, North Korea launched another missile. I guess we're not doing much about it. That's the whole story. But on the Russia side, you've got all the elements for a perfect story. You got the characters. You've got mystery. There's no mystery with the North Korea thing. We kind of know how that's going to turn out, right? But with the Russia thing, we think, this new revelation, this new thing, something's going to happen. But it also has one important element that you need for a story to really have heat and energy. And that is that a lot of people who see the story, not all of them, but a lot of them look at it and they say, that couldn't possibly be true. And there's actually a psychological phenomenon that explains that. There's a great blogger named Scott Alexander who wrote a lot about this. So the less true a story is, and the more the public is onto it, like this just doesn't sound right, the more energy it gets, because that's how you get the people competing and talking about it. But it also has confirmation bias, because it's a sketchy Russia thing, and people think, Trump is sketchy too, so it just sort of fits together in this great hand-in-glove way.
But isn't the role of the press, at least in part, to discern, to make distinctions between the stories that, are interesting and compelling, but also maybe the ones that matter more, just objectively? Like a country that is actively threatening to kill us and appears to be developing the capacity to do that is more important than a country that isn't, right? So shouldn't we be at least trying to herd the public into the more important direction?
Well, it certainly gets reported. Nobody is missing the fact that North Korea has launched another missile, but there just isn't a lot we can do about it. There isn't much to talk about.
Right.
It really is the same story that just keeps getting repeated. But with the Russia stuff, there are levels on levels, there are hearings, there are revelations, there are leaks. It's just got everything that you need in a story, except credibility, which is, also helps it.
It really is like one of those Russian dolls, and you open it up, and there's just nothing in the middle of it at all. It's unbelievable.
Let me
I'm sorry,
tell you about
30 seconds. Tell me.
Oh, well, the credibility problem is that even the CIA says that they are confident about it, confident that Russia interfered. I don't use the word confident if I know something's true. Just saying.
Well, and certainly not as the basis of threatening war against a country. You got to be certain, and they're not. Scott, thank you for joining us. Scott Adams. We'll be right back. MS-13. We just returned from El Salvador. We're with the Attorney General Jeff Sessions, interviewing former members of MS-13. One who killed 25 people, went to a prison where MS-13 detainees are being held, and in general got a much fuller sense of what this gang's about and the threat it poses to the United States because of our broken immigration system. And that threat is absolutely real. So we have lots of details all next week, and we'll hope you tune in then. In the meantime, good night from Washington. Have a great weekend. We're going out to our friends over at The 5. See you Monday.